One of my goals in starting these food forest projects and the YouTube channel is to share with everyone what these look like over time as they grow. So what I have to show with you today is frankly not super impressive. It's a young baby food forest. Right here, this is my front yard food forest and it's only going into its second year. So a lot of things are still really small, sticks with leaves on them, I say. But I want you to see these videos over the years and watch this grow, and you learn how much time and effort it takes to grow this food forest and learn what it looks like over the years as they grow. I also am going to do a tour of the middle school garden, a food forest that's going into its third or fourth year of production, so quite a bit further along, although still young. Anyway, let's get started. So this is my front yard. This is where I've been doing a food forest project. The side yard over here I have fenced in, and that I have a traditional veggie garden as well as some plant nursery stuff over there. But over here, this is just classic food forest. I have two main paths right now, one along the back and then one riding straight up the middle. This is a rock circle here. The path kind of circles around the rocks. I probably will throw in some very small, more walking paths in the middle of this area here, in the middle of this area over here, but I'm kind of letting things pan out before I put those in. In the back here, right against the house, this was a straw bale cold frame for this past year. I'm going to be spreading this around this year and turning this whole thing into a native flower garden. So right now there's some arugula who's sending up seed, and some lettuce, which I'm still pulling some. And then here is the very beginnings of a flower garden. There's some leftover bulbs from the last owners, and I'm slowly transplanting in some native flowers and spreading the whole thing this way. One important design element here for me, this is the septic pipe for the house, and it runs out here. That's where the rock circle is circling this. So I didn't want anything here that would have strong roots that might interfere with the septic system. So I put this path over top of the pipe, and then even to the edges of this I put more plants that don't have larger root systems and more invasive root systems. So I kind of left the larger trees far away from the septic pipe. And then some other kind of larger design elements. I wanted a visual barrier between our house and the neighbor's house. They're really nice neighbors, but it's nice to have a barrier here. So these tree tubes, this first line of tree tubes are hazelnuts, and right behind them is a row of pawpaws, although one of these trees, this is a pear tree right here in this row of pawpaws. So the hazelnuts I planted pretty densely together, pretty tight, so this is going to form a really dense hedge. The pawpaws are shade tolerant, so they should be fine being shaded out by that dense hedge, and it should have a pretty good visual barrier between our two houses. Along the front of the road, I really wanted to plan out a row of evergreen shrubs as a visual and sound barrier for this somewhat busy road, but the evergreen shrubs I chose tea trees, Camellia sinensis, like your black tea and green tea and stuff. They just did not survive the winter. I really need them in a very, very sunny location to help them overwinter because they're right on the northern edge, so I think the sun will help them overwinter better. So what I've been doing this year, instead of the evergreen shrubs, I have a row here of beach plums, which are kind of up against the road. They'll handle the salt spray in the winter, and they're okay being shaded out in the winter, and they'll get plenty of full sun in the summer. So, and they have beautiful white flowers. So this will be a long row along the road here. Again, planted a little densely together as a visual barrier, as a hedge, but a big row of beautiful white flowers in the spring. Inside this rock circle is a native flower garden that my wife has been building. And then here in the main food forest section, I have a mix of a bunch of mainly berry plants. This is north here, facing towards the house, and while south is typically very sunny, we have these large trees that shade some of this front area here, especially in the winter, although in the summer this starts to get close to full sun. So I have some of the taller elements, like this pear tree and this peach tree, towards the back, towards the northern side, so they don't shade out some of the smaller elements. And then I have some smaller elements here, generally kind of in rows. So a lot of honeyberries right now. I've been mainly working with honeyberries in this front yard, as well as the beach plums, and then this is going to be a row of Nanking cherries, and I also have some other Nanking cherries here. So this here, running next to the path, is a row of honeyberries. And then on this side of the path is a row of honeyberries as well as some yastaberry. Right now I've kind of planted garlic in here just to fill in some space and some gaps. This isn't really a perennial and it won't be here for very many more years, but it's here for right now while there's some extra space. On this far side of the food forest, right now these are all elderberry stakes I've kind of just shoved in to grow out to be 1-year-old trees and sell next year. But the goal for this here is a wall of somewhat densely planted figs. I think they'll really appreciate the heat from the driveway here. And it'll be nice to kind of have a wall separating. I think that'll even, figs are really deer proof, and so I think that'll even prevent the deer from migrating this way. They tend to want to hang out on this side of the yard here. So a lot of berry bushes like this Nanking cherry, this honeyberry here. These I've wrapped in this metal just as a deer and rabbit protection. They really got hammered hard last year, but the ones that survived, actually they pretty much all survived. They just didn't really thrive or grow very much. And so I'm kind of wrapping them this year until they get a little taller, a little above deer brows. And so that's kind of the mid-layer element. You know, of course there's this upper layer of the fruit trees, and I'll probably add some more back here somewhere. There's this mid-layer of berry bushes. Here's some sea buckthorn, as well as like the fig trees. And then I have a lower kind of ground cover layer of rhubarb and thyme. These are ramps or wild leeks. I have some strawberries scattered in here. In my original vision, I really imagined this whole thing being a field of strawberry as a ground cover, but I think it's going to get hit too hard by the deer. We'll see. I scattered some in this year just to see if the deer are going to ignore it or not. I also have a few gummy berry bushes. These I've planted close to the big fruit trees. They're a nitrogen fixer, so as you prune them, they'll release nitrogen into the soil and feed some of these larger elements. This is also one of my favorite tasting berries. It's like gummy bears. So that's the front yard, and frankly, I've really just ignored it this year. I've been putting some things in, I've been planting, but in terms of maintaining, I haven't done any watering. I haven't really done any weeding. Everything here is mulched really heavily, probably at least 6 inches of mulch everywhere, some places more. And that's really helped to maintain moisture and then also to prevent weeds from breaking through. Here up against the house in this corner, kind of surrounded by concrete in the house, I've planted things that will really tend to spread more vigorously. So you'll see here, these are a native sunflower called Jerusalem artichoke. They have a really delicious edible tuber. And I also have some mint in here from my great-grandfather's farm, some apple mint, that'll spread in here as a ground cover. And these sunchokes will be a tall, beautiful sunflower upper layer. And then I also will plant in here some ground nuts, which will be a vining layer, which will vine up the sunchokes. All of these are things that spread pretty rapidly, but they're surrounded by the house and this concrete, which will prevent them from spreading. A really fun element of this project for me has been this creek, which runs just around the house here. Really steep banks, and so I do want to do a lot of planting on these banks to help retain soil, especially these areas here. You can see the previous owners were stacking rocks just to prevent erosion, and so I'm going to leave those there, but also be planting plants in there to also hold on to soil and stop erosion. The creek for me has been not really so much of a design project. The front yard I really designed out. I'm have a long-term vision. The creek, I really just kind of like plugging and seeing. So I have access to a bunch of cheap plants, a lot of plums, because they will really spread and will really clone themselves and spread via runners, so I think they'll help hold on to soil a lot. I have a lot of high bush cranberries, and I put some honeyberries in here, some Nanking cherry, like pawpaw trees in here, and ground nuts, and I'm just kind of like plugging in a whole bunch of different stuff, some elderberries, and just like trying to see what's gonna take, what's gonna work out well in this area. Part of my problems here with the creek is that it's hard to have like a fresh start. In the front yard, I covered everything with wood chips and then planted into it. Here in the creek, like it's hard to dump these wood chips. They just tend to run down into the creek. Also, it's just a ton of surface area to dump wood chips, and I don't have any help. Like trucks can't dump it halfway for me, and I just kind of spread it around in that area. As the plantings go on, like here, I am finding it's worth my time to spread the wood chips and to carry the wood chips. But generally, for the most part, this has been a project of just kind of plug and see, and I'm excited to kind of see what happens in a couple years, see what plants really take, what plants really do well, and what plants don't appreciate this environment so much, and I'll just kind of hone in on those plants. So far I've seen that the Nanking cherries here and elsewhere have done really well. I expect the pawpaw to do well. I also have seen some honeyberries kind of hanging in there, and I have really good success so far with the high bush cranberries, although I don't think they're going to be the tastiest element in the forest, so I'd love to get some other tastier elements in here. Along the edge of the creek here, I planted a row of fruit trees, mostly apples. I think there's one pear mixed in here. Part of the idea here is I planted them on pretty large rootstock. I really wanted them to get big and cast some shade here on the driveway. During like June and July and August, this car is unbearably hot. This whole driveway is just disgustingly hot. So to have a larger fruit tree casting some shade would be a really nice gift. Coming into the backyard here, this is mostly just a seating area for the family. We're working on a garden bed of shade-loving plants here along the north side of the house. I have some firewood storage, and then I've just kind of continued on along here at the creek. The edge is going to be some black currants, which should handle the somewhat shadier conditions better, and then some honeyberries and some figs, even in areas which get a little bit more sun. Now, right on the other side of this creek, we have these large trees which are unfortunately kind of leaning over the house some. One of my projects right now is I'm saving up as much money as I can to take down these trees. I hate taking down trees when I'm in the business of growing more trees, but they're gonna land on the house. And so I'm excited to figure out what to do here on this bank. I'll probably replant it with an orchard of things like pawpaw trees or maybe some other fruit trees. We'll see how much sun this gets once these big trees are taken down. But I also haven't wanted to do too much planting in the creek area back here until these trees get taken down, just under the assumption that stuff's gonna get killed. And this whole side yard here is part of my property as well. I'm not really kind of thinking about this area here as like a food forest, but I'll show it to you anyway, show you some of what I'm working on. As we're walking over there, I have this row of flowers right by the road and around the mailbox. I have an apple tree here with some currants. I think these are red currants along the road, as well as some flowering plants like this yarrow, and some lavender here on either side of the path. So just trying to build in a lot of beauty along the path, flowers, and a few edible fruits. I also have these beautiful willow. Now these were just stakes that I got. These are stakes of Winter's Glory willow that I got from Michael Judd down in his permaculture homestead in Jersey. Now these haven't really grown at all. I got these like 8-foot long stakes. I shoved them into the ground and then protected them from the deer some, as well as these help just kind of support and hold them up. The idea here is I want this to be a living arch. So I'm going to tie these together as they grow, and I'll probably also plant more in. I was just trying to save some money, so I only got 4, and then I can propagate from them pretty easily once they get established. So I'll probably have a row of maybe 8 or so of these willows, creating like a living arch to walk through as you walk over to the other side. So this area here, the fence is brand new for this year. There was a vegetable garden kind of right here last year, which is a very small, small percentage of what the full space is now. But that little veggie garden only had a 3-foot tall fence. The deer just they didn't even have to hop over it. They just crawled over it almost. And so it didn't do anything. So I spent the money and I put in this 8-foot tall deer fence from Deer Busters. I have a full review of it on the YouTube channel. So far, earlier in the season, nothing's gotten in, although just judging by some of these willow bushes over here that were hit hard by deer last year and haven't been touched yet, I don't think the deer have made it across the road yet. I expect they're coming any day now, though. So this, my main project this year was installing this fence, so there's still a lot of things that are kind of a work in progress here. This front area here is where my veggie garden is going to be. It is kind of where the veggie garden is right now, although I'm really going to do some restructuring of it in the fall. In the fall, what I'm thinking about doing is these rows here, so kind of doing a market style garden of rows with paths in between, maybe 3 foot, 4 foot wide beds with paths in between. And I think that'll just be easier for me. I can put this this floating row cover over the rows and some plastic, make a mini polytunnel. So I think that'll really help me with some season extension, with some pest prevention. It'll just be easier to manage with the rows like that. In the front right now I have some young seedlings. This is just kind of a shadier area. The backyard's probably the shadiest, but you know, that's where the family likes to relax, and this isn't very relaxing. So I have some, you know, some younger plants that appreciate some of the shade. I'm still trying to figure out if I want them here, or maybe I'll have to build a little shade cloth for them somewhere else. Right now along the fence I have a bunch of climbing beans, Kentucky Wonder pole beans, and some peas, and some Trail of Tears black beans, as well as some tomatoes, which I'll have kind of climb the fence too. I'll have to tie them to the fence as they grow. This is a row of perennial kale with a little bit of lettuce at the end. Here I have some more lettuce, and some onions, and some garlic, and beans over here. And then along the fence here is a 100-foot row of blueberry bushes. So these are all little babies yet. I just planted them this year, so they still have a long way to go, but I interspersed a few tomatoes in here, as well as some strawberries, just because I know this, you know, these bushes aren't going to take up much real estate this year, so I might as well make use of the space while I have it. Between this 100-foot row of blueberry bushes and this row of fruit trees, I think I'll have some nice visual barrier between our house and the neighbor's house over here. And then this area here is the main bulk of the plant nursery. I have about 1,000 plus seeds in the ground and beginnings of trees here. For example, these are some American chestnuts from the American Chestnut Foundation that are just starting to pop out. These are all raised beds, air prune beds. I have some more information about that elsewhere on the channel. And then in the back, I plan to do kind of like a greenhouse back here. This gets an absolute ton of sun in the winter, and it's kind of shaded by this beautiful oak tree, some in the center. I think it's going to be a great spot for a greenhouse, but that's a couple years away. So a lot of restructuring in this area to do yet, a lot of moving around. But it's just nice to not have deer come in and destroy it. So this year I'm just happy to be able to grow some veggies. Last year was a mess. Anyway, let's head on over to the middle school garden. I'll show you what's going on over there. Yo friends, little scene change here, and we're now at the middle school garden, middle school food forest that I've been doing some volunteer work at for about 3 years now. As you can see here, we're talking about year 3, so this is a lot more lush. Unfortunately, some of the lushness, a lot of it has to do with this thistle, which is the bane of my existence here in this garden. As they say when you're working with perennials, the first year these plants sleep, they don't do much. The second year they creep, they grow slowly, and then the third year they really start to leap. So this food forest here is in its 3rd year. It's in the beginning stages of leaping. I think it's still a couple years away from being a more established food forest, but it's well on its way. The goals of this food forest are a little different than some of the goals for my own property. Here I wanted to have food that was more palatable to youngsters, so less pawpaws, more apples. I also wanted to have food that was harvestable while still in the school year. Strawberries and honeyberries can be harvested like the last week of school, while I have like apples and pears and things like that that can be harvested at the beginning of the next school year. So let's do a short walkthrough. Let's check it out. I'll talk with you about some of the design elements I created here, as well as showing how these plants are doing. Now, if anything, this is truly a testament to the staying power of these plants. This is a property I've fairly neglected for the last year, and the kids didn't really do too much with it either. They were working on other parts of the garden here. We moved last year, and so I was working on my own projects at home and just didn't get over here very much. I didn't really water, and despite us having like 30 some days of drought last year, this did really well, and a lot of things survived. I attribute that to heavy mulching, and also just planting perennials, a lot of natives which are more hardy anyway. So let's walk through. I used what strawberries I had and had on hand for free as a ground cover here, and frankly it's been amazing. And I'm trying to do everything I can to spread these strawberries ground cover into the whole area here. The thistle is just the bane of my existence, and yet here where the strawberries are growing, the thistle is growing the least. I think it's because they're really shading the soil. The thistle likes the full sun, and so if I keep spreading these strawberries elsewhere, I think I'll have to pull a lot less thistle. When we first started this, we didn't have this pergola structure here, which I think will eventually have a roof. So I wanted to plant some elderberries here that we could kind of bend over this pathway and provide a little bit of shade. There's also a small pawpaw here. This is probably in its second or third year. Again, that's something I have not watered or taken care of or even fertilized or anything its whole time here, and it seems happy. It hasn't grown a ton, but it seems very happy. I have a row of rhubarb up along the side here. As this grows, these big leaves, it's going to start shading out, and it's going to stop this grass from encroaching onto the food forest area. That's my hope and my goal, at least. Man, and as you can see with these strawberries, they're just loaded with flowers and loaded with young berries. We're going to have a ton to pick with the kids this year. I think these berries will be ready before they end the school year. I also have a few blueberry plants in here. These were gifted us for free, and so I kind of plugged them in, and they seem really happy. Even though I haven't done anything to acidify the soil in this spot, I'll have to do some continuing work and continuing following up with them. I want to make sure they stay happy. I may need to acidify the soil right around them a little bit more, but we'll see. Right now they seem great. So the main structure for this food forest, I have these overstory elements. I've chosen smaller trees. You don't really have enough space for like a big hickory or a chestnut tree, so I chose a lot of kind of understory fruit trees as the overstory element here in this forest. So we have a pear tree, and here's a fig tree, a pear, I think that's a pear, that's an apple. There's another apple back there, a big apple here. So a lot of like, oh nice, look at this. We're getting some baby apples this year for the first time. Fantastic. And then underneath these overstory elements, I've been plugging in berry bushes. So like a yasta berry, and here's a currant. This is a sage bush that really didn't handle the hard winter we had very well, although it's starting to come back to life here. That's fun. So for this project, it definitely was not like as super heavily designed as other projects I've worked on. It's mainly kind of been what trees can we get for free or really cheap, and so I really paid attention to the overstory trees, wanting to plant them at appropriate distances apart. Some pawpaws here, and then I'm just kind of plugging in understory stuff and really just kind of seeing what takes. This back section, I hadn't really planted anything, so this year I came in with the kids and we got some honeyberry bushes, some small ones. It's probably 5 or 6 scattered in here, and I want to just keep spreading a bunch of honeyberries back here. These will be a great thing for the kids to have their last week of school. And then along the back here, I have a row of hazelnuts planted densely together. So in a couple years here, we'll have this hedgerow of hazelnuts along the back side of this. This is the southernmost side, so I really wanted to plant this row of asparagus, so it's going to be somewhat tall, but not too tall as to shade everything else out. And we haven't really gotten around to planting in this section yet, so we've left it as grass so we can stay on top of mowing. In the asparagus patch, I've tried to mix in some strawberries, so we have asparagus and strawberries growing together. Now, the kids haven't really eaten the asparagus, but I wanted to plant it, and it's fun to introduce them to something new. This was a pawpaw tree that was gifted to us just a few weeks ago, and I didn't even know what to expect. I was imagining it was going to be a lot smaller, but they brought it, and it looks quite mature, and so far really happy. So we'll see if a large pawpaw like this can handle being transplanted from someone else's property. I don't know if this must be a sucker from it or something. We'll have to pay attention to this and probably start doing some pruning here. So there's a lot of potential this year here as a yasta berry bush, getting some berries, and just all this like bright green stuff is new growth. So this is the largest I've seen this bush. It's really blowing up. Some beautiful flowers, some more berries. This one is really covered in berries here. And like I said, we're starting to get some apples here for the first time on this apple tree. I've also included this apple mint as a ground cover. This is something that was actually grown in my great-grandfather's farm, and it's spreading all over here, and where it's growing I also see less pressure from the thistle. We have a cherry tree. We're going to get lots of cherries this year. this summer. I think one of the biggest impediments to this project, besides just my lack of time over the last year, has been money. Everything we've been doing here has been on the cheap or free, donated stuff. I think if we had like a huge chunk of change, I would just buy enough strawberries to just absolutely cover this maybe 1/10 of an acre or so area and come in with the kids and spend an afternoon just like plugging in strawberries everywhere. I think that would help solve a lot of our problems and be a wonderful treat for the kids. You know, maybe next year or so. I'm working on selling some plants, and I'll probably buy a bunch of strawberries for my house and share it with the kids here too. I have some grape cuttings here that I just kind of plugged into the ground. I had to cut up my own grape plant a little bit, and so I plugged some cuttings into the ground and they really started to root. So I'm going to move these probably next year, move these along the fence. This fence has been a pain just to stay on top of weeding, so hopefully the grapes will just kind of cover the whole fence, and we'll have delicious food and won't have to worry about the weeds so much. Yeah, so as you can see, it's still not like very heavily producing right yet, but the trees are quite a bit bigger, the shrubs are quite a bit bigger, and the shrubs are actually really starting to get fully productive. The strawberry plants here are definitely fully productive. And I think, I think this is going to be a pretty sweet place. As for maintenance, I think it could do with more time and watering and fertilizing, but I think if I just this summer stay on top of coming and weed whacking the path and spot weed whacking the thistle in areas, I think that'll do a lot just to help these plants continue to break through and break free of the thistle. And then, as the trees really start to grow out and shade the soil, I think that's going to help with the thistle a lot too. If you have any other suggestions for thistle, let me know. I've tried everything. I've tried dumping like 10 inches of mulch and it still hasn't done anything. If I also could do anything different here, just because I know I don't have much time for this space, if we had extra money and resources, I would buy larger and more established plants. These little baby honeyberries were just super cheap, super easy to get at that size. But it's gonna be a lot. I'll have to be here a lot to pull the weeds aside and stay on top of watering more. I think if I was able to buy, more established bushes that were a foot or two high and plant those everywhere, I think this would be even more low maintenance from the very get-go.